Today, we are talking about Judaism. If you would, go ahead and make our new section title, Judaism, and then underline. So write down Judaism and underline our section title, Judaism. After you've written down Judaism, its symbol, which you can see on the right-hand side, is the Star of David. It's a six-pointed star. So we're going to make that six-pointed star on our notes next to our section title of Judaism. So how do you make a six-pointed star? Well, it's not all that difficult to make a six-pointed star. First, make a triangle. So bam, we got a triangle. Now, we're going to make a triangle going the opposite direction. Oh, there you go, six-pointed star. All right, so it's a triangle, and then triangle going the opposite way. And that gives us our six-pointed star. So go ahead and put that next to our section title of Judaism. So Judaism is the smallest of our five major religions. So of the five major religions we are covering, Judaism has the least amount of worshipers of those five. So it is the smallest one of the five. Now, when we talk about Judaism, you can usually refer to people who worship Judaism as Jews, Hebrews, Israelites, Israelis, Semites. All those goes along Judaism. Most people just call people that are Judaism, they're Jewish. Normally it's called Jews. Hebrew is generally the language, but most Hebrews are, of course, Jewish. Israelites are people that, live in Israel, Israelis, someone who lives in Israel, and Semites. Semites would be kind of Jewish as well. All right, all those words, though, mean kind of the same thing. All right, new bullet. History. So bullet, history. So way back in the biblical age, you have these nomadic herders, which were the Jewish people. Go ahead and make a one and write down nomadic herders. So one, nomadic herders. So you had these Jewish people. They were living way over in like Iran and Iraq. All right, so you got the map right here. And you got like Jordan, Saudi Arabia. So like way over here. I can't even move my mouse that far, but way over here, way further to the right, you would have like Iran and Iraq, which is where the Jewish people originally were living at, being nomadic herders. Nomadic herding animals such as sheep and goats. Both sheep and goats are from the Middle East area. Cows are also from the Middle East area as well, but they would have been herding sheep and goats. And as they kind of came over to the east part here, to the west, so they came from the east, went west. As they came over, eventually they migrated over to the west. Go ahead and make a two. We're going to write down. Settled in Mesopotamia. Okay. So they're nomadic herders. They're living over in Mesopotamia, in Iran, Iraq area, and eventually they're going to come over to the west and come over here. Mesopotamia, that's on the rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. So over in Iraq, which is over here, there's two rivers going through there called the Tigris and Euphrates. It's one of our four major river valley civilizations. That is where the Hebrew people were kind of living at. And okay, so now eventually I said they migrated. Migrated means they left from one area and moved to a new area. All right, that's what migration means. So it means to move from one place to another. Let's write that down so you guys don't get confused. I'm going to make a three and write down the word migrated. So three, migrated. And then after three, migrated, go ahead and write down move from one place to another. Okay, so when the Hebrews migrated from Mesopotamia over to this area over here, to Palestine area, when they migrated over to there, that's a migration. All right, so you migrated, you move from one place to another. Go ahead and make a four. And we're going to write down led by Abraham. So 4, led by Abraham. So when the Hebrews migrated from Mesopotamia over the Palestine area, modern day Israel, they were led by Abraham. And Abraham's going to be our founder for the Judaism religion. All right, so why is it that Abraham's our founder for the Judaism religion? Well, the Jewish people have a belief called the covenant. Let's make a bullet and write down the covenant. So, bullet the covenant. And we got to talk about what this covenant is because this is important to Judaism belief and religion. So, bullet the covenant. So, what is the covenant? Well, the covenant is an agreement. Now, basically, the word covenant just means that it's an agreement between God and someone else. In this case, it's going to be an agreement between God and Abraham. So, it's a special agreement. Let's go ahead and make a 1, and we're going to write down special agreement. So, make a 1 and write down special agreement. So a covenant is a special agreement. That's number 1. So number 1, special agreement. So this covenant, the special agreement, is made between God and with Abraham. And in this special agreement, what it says, well, actually, let's write down that it's between God and Abraham first. So special agreement. And then let's write down between God and Abraham. Let's write that down for number 2. So number 2, between God and Abraham. So you have this covenant, this special agreement, and it's between God and Abraham. What does the special agreement says? Well, the special agreement says if the Jewish people worshiped God and his laws, they would be protected and loved by him. Okay, so that's what the covenant says. Go ahead and make a 3. And we're going to write down Jewish people worship God and his laws. So 3, Jewish people worship God and his laws. So just kind of know that the covenant is agreement between God and Abraham. In that agreement, Abraham agrees that the Hebrew people will worship God and only God, and they will agree to follow his laws. And in return, God would then protect them and love them. Okay, so that is the agreement between God and Abraham, the covenant. So where does the Jewish faith, where does it get this information from? Like, why do they believe this for? Well, this is in the book of Genesis. So if you've ever read the Bible has 2 parts. It has the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is the Torah. Okay, so that's the Jewish holy or sacred text. Okay, so the sacred text for Judaism is the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible in the Old Testament. All right, and in the Old Testament, the book of Genesis is the first book in the book in the Bible in the Old Testament. So it's the very first one is the book of Genesis, and in the book of Genesis, it does talk about beginnings of earth, and it also does talk about Abraham and his family. Now, also in the book of Genesis, as part of the covenant, Abraham was told by God that his people would be given a promised land, basically land that was promised to them because they worshiped God, and he promised that he would protect them. So therefore, he promised land to them. And the land that God promised to the Jewish people is present day Israel. Go ahead and make a 4, and we're going to write down promised land, present day Israel. Okay, so you have that covenant. God then said he would protect the Jewish people. He then promised them land. That land that he promised them was Israel. Okay. So Abraham's family tree, what it looks like is you got Abraham. He has a son, Isaac. Isaac marries Rebecca. They have two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob then has the 12 sons of the Israelites. So what ends up happening is that along the family tree, eventually, one of the 12 sons of the Israelites, that's Joseph, he's one of the 12 sons. Joseph is like, man, you know what? Being in Israel kind of sucks. I want to go to Egypt. So Joseph takes his people and he leaves Israel and he then goes to Egypt with a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of Hebrews, some of the Israelites. So goes to Egypt, and then when Joseph takes all these Hebrews over to Egypt, it turns out they got put into slavery by the Egyptians. All right, that then leads us to Moses. Gotta make a bullet and write down the word Moses. So bullet, Moses. So you probably have heard of the story of Moses before. Generally, there's a couple of movies about Moses. The main one that you kind of have is the Ten Commandments with Charleston Heston. That's kind of one of the main movies about Moses. The other movie that's pretty good about Moses is called The Prince of Egypt. It's an animated movie that came out in the late 1990s. Oh, that's also pretty good too. So if you want a good movie about Moses, there you go. Ten Commandments or The Prince of Egypt. Those are both pretty good. So Moses, he's chosen by God. He's chosen to kind of be a prophet for God. Go ahead and make a one chosen by God. So you have Moses. He's in Egypt. What is he doing in Egypt? Well, he was given up as a baby by his mother. He's floating down like a river, and then he's found by the wife of the pharaoh. She picks him up, raises him as her kid. He's not in next line to be the pharaoh. He has like an older brother. Older brother is in line to be the next pharaoh, but he's not in line to be the next pharaoh. Eventually, though, he does come to find out that he's a Hebrew, and then he starts kind of trying to get his people free. He eventually kind of gets kicked out of Egypt, and then he eventually ends up coming back. And he's like, hey, once he comes back, he's like, hey, let my people go. Okay. So his job is to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and back to the promised land. Gonna make it two, lead the Israelites out of Egypt. So he's been chosen by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and back to Israel, back to the promised land where they're supposed to be. So eventually, a whole bunch of stuff happens. He eventually is able to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and back over to Israel. They do spend like 40 years kind of traveling around, but eventually they do make it back to the promised land. So eventually, Moses goes to Mount Sinai. And when he goes to Mount Sinai, he receives the 10 Commandments from the Lord on Mount Sinai. Go ahead and make a three. And we're going to write down, receive the 10 Commandments from the Lord on Mount Sinai. So he does end up receiving the 10 Commandments from the Lord on Mount Sinai. Remember, we kind of talked about those before when we were talking about Buddhism. We mentioned how the five precepts are similar to 10 Commandments. So we probably should look up the 10 Commandments here just to make sure we got them all set here as to what the 10 Commandments are. I just need the list of them. And let's make sure that's actual correct list. All right. That's 8. Yeah. There we go. All right, so 10 Commandments. So first one, you shall have no other gods but me. Very simple. Two, you shall make for yourself any idol, nor bow to it or worship it. So basically, no idol worshiping. Three, you may not misuse the name of your Lord God. Four, you shall remember and keep the Sabbath, the holy day. 5, respect your father and mother. 6, you must not commit murder. 7, you must not commit adultery. 8, you must not steal. 9, you must not give false evidence against your neighbor. And 10, you must not be envious of your neighbor's goods. You shall not be envious of his house, nor his wife, nor anything that belongs to your neighbor. All right, there you go. There's the 10 Commandments. Let's go ahead and stop there for today.